Welcome to the Safe Routes to School webinar, Building Sustainable District-Wide Safe Routes to School Programs with Policies and Partnerships. This webinar was made possible with funding from the Michigan Department of Transportation, the Michigan Fitness Foundation, and the Federal Highway Administration. I'm Max Fulkerson, the Contracts Coordinator for the Michigan Fitness Foundation Safe Routes to School program. Our other presenter is Adam Jenks, who is the Program Coordinator for the Safe Routes to School program. Michigan Fitness Foundation is a nonprofit organization located in Lansing and has been involved with Michigan Safe Routes to School program since its inception in 2003. We administer the Safe Routes to School program on behalf of MDOT by providing training and technical assistance to all schools and communities participating in Safe Routes to School. So today we're going to talk about the district-wide approach and what it is, why it's a good idea, how to sustain the program with policies, identifying available expertise to build partnerships, and integrating Safe Routes to School with local pre-existing efforts. So the district-wide approach basically means that more than one school operates Safe Routes to School active transportation program at the same time. It means more than that, though, really. It's a coordinated planning effort that encompasses support from the top down and not just the bottom up. It has many advantages and eliminates the wait your turn perception. Often when a school has a program and it's successful, other schools in the district hear about it and they want to try and participate as well. And a district-wide is a way to bring everybody in all at the same time. And, they don't think that one school is getting maybe something that they're not. It demonstrates that safety is important for all students, and the district-wide approach demonstrates a commitment to active transportation. It can impact or reduce transportation costs more significantly than if it's one school. It can reduce time to apply for funding, reduce the number of times construction inconveniences residents in the community, but it doesn't mean that the program looks the same at each school. Some schools, you might have a walking school bus. Elementary and middle school kids, they have different start times, different travel patterns and behaviors. They sometimes need different things to make them feel safe and be safe, and they will be encouraged by different things and perhaps respond to different messages. They certainly learn and understand at different levels and require education to meet them where they are. So a district-wide approach is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not doing the same thing at every building. Some buildings would have maybe a walking school bus. So that is basically like where you, instead of getting on a bus, everybody is walking as a group through the neighborhood, and kids come out of their house and they get on the bus, so to speak, and then walk the rest of the way to school. It's a good way to have adult supervision and ease parents' concerns about their children's safety. But some programs that work for elementary kids may not work for middle school and junior high students. Corner Captains is a program whereby you have adult supervision not walking with the group to school, but adults would be positioned strategically on corners just to sort of keep an eye on the group, make sure everything's okay. But it doesn't really, invade the privacy of the middle school students, the junior high students, so they respond to that better. Older students may not want adults walking with them, but parents may still want some supervision. Older students can typically travel longer distances and navigate a wider range of conditions and situations on their way to school and back. A bicycle train is basically like a walking school bus, except you're on bikes. This looks like a lot more fun than riding the school bus. I don't think I want my kindergartner in the front of the pack, but if she were older, the experience could help her develop confidence, leadership, and independence. But these bicycle trains, they do require good planning and the right conditions. A district-wide approach can include the high schools in the plan, but Safe Routes to School funds can't pay for expenses and activities directed for high school students. Exceptions would be pedestrian and safety education targeted for drivers in the community. Also, they could walk with younger students, and some of them may already do that if they have younger siblings. Planning teams are encouraged throughout the process to include older students to get their input and their suggestions, as that can make a program more successful. So again, why are we doing this? Well, we're here because fewer kids are walking and biking, more parents are driving. We have more childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma, and fewer opportunities for freedom and adventure. Older students are aware of these issues and challenges facing them, especially in terms of environment and the quality of life. And they want to make a better future for themselves and the kids that come after them. These older high school students can be powerful allies for change. So while they're maybe not going to be participants in the program, it would be really good to include them in your planning efforts. Admittedly, we are biased, but we think that Safe Routes to School district-wide programs offer many benefits for students, parents, educators, and the whole community. And the district-wide in particular is a way to ease the burden on the outside experts during the planning process. Potentially, you could have fewer meetings, potentially lower costs to apply and build. For the students in the district and parents, it brings everybody on board all at the same time and helps them to build lifelong healthy habits and develop independence and confidence, etc. So after the hard work of forming a team, collecting data, applying for funds, maybe designing and constructing new pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, implementing education and encouragement programs to get more students walking and biking, how do you keep the momentum going? The district-wide approach creates a certain level of community buy-in and institutionalization as Safe Routes to School program activities become the new normal. We've learned from local programs in Michigan that policies and partnerships can help you sustain those efforts. Some examples of some municipal level Safe Routes to School friendly policies are Complete Streets, Vision Zero, some local ordinances for drivers to yield to pedestrians and crosswalk, and the 3-foot passing law for cyclists. Complete Streets. When making improvements or changes to a road, Complete Streets policies require that you consider all potential users and modes of travel during the design and the construction. The Michigan Complete Streets Coalition is a good resource to see where local support is growing for this policy. Some communities, have a policy. Some communities have an ordinance. Some people have a committee. Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. First implemented in Sweden in the 1990s, is being adopted by more cities in the United States and around the world. So, what's the difference between a traditional approach to transportation and the Vision Zero approach? In the traditional approach, which you could say is exhibited by our system, it's kind of assumed that traffic deaths are inevitable. They're just going to happen. It's just a fact of life. We can try and minimize it, but they're always going to be there. And that's really a result of the fact that a lot of these roads are designed with the assumption of perfect human behavior in driving. If everybody would just, drive the way the roads were designed to have them drive, then there wouldn't be any crashes or serious injuries or deaths. Probably not very realistic. The idea is that you can prevent collisions, but you can't eliminate them. It's up to everybody as an individual to be responsible for their own safety. And saving lives is expensive. Whereas in the Vision Zero model, they reject those assumptions and assert that traffic deaths are preventable. And humans are going to fail. So you need to consider that at the outset and design your system to be robust enough to allow for that. We're going to try and prevent fatal and severe crashes rather than just prevent collisions. It's a systems approach, and it basically puts forth the idea that saving lives is worth the cost. It's not too expensive. We can do this. Safe Routes National Partnership has been doing a lot of work to highlight the mutual benefits that Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School share. When it's safer for elementary students, it's safer for all pedestrians. We also have policies that get drivers to pay more attention to pedestrians in general The idea being that if they do that, then they'll pay more attention to students in particular. One way communities are doing that is by passing local ordinances for pedestrians to yield in a crosswalk. Again, there's no state law requiring that, so it's up to local communities to do that. How much space are drivers required to give cyclists on the road when they pass them? 3 feet. That's pretty much the state law now, which is a really nice recent policy victory for Michigan cyclists. But some municipalities are exploring local ordinances that give the cyclist a larger buffer, like 5 or 6 feet, as another way to increase safety. Some examples of some school level policies or district level policies that are friendly for safe routes to school are listed in front of you. And these policies can make safe routes to school programs operate better, smoother, longer, or not at all. Policies that allow or encourage students to ride their bicycle to school, again, are friendly. We've seen some districts that prohibit students from riding their bike to school. Obviously, that's a situation where you're only going to have walkers, or the group needs to try and maybe work to change the policy. Another example is early dismissal for walkers. If you let the students that are walking out maybe 2 or 3 minutes ahead of the other students, it gives them a chance to get out of the school and out of the conflict zones in the parking lot, away from the cars and the buses. Another example is to open the school building up a little bit early in the morning for walkers. It's not very conducive to walking if once you walk and you got to get to school and then just stand around and wait for the building to be open. Anytime you have policies that clarify or facilitate volunteer opportunities is going to be a plus for your Safe Routes to School program. These programs typically thrive when they have involvement of parental or community volunteers. And so any way that you can make that process easier and clearer is going to increase the likelihood that you're going to get volunteers. And then another idea that we've come across recently, which we think is really innovative and holds a lot of potential, is the reverse bus routing. The idea here is that the kids that live farthest away generally have the longest ride on the bus. Like in the afternoon, the bus will leave and they'll drop off the kids that live closest to the school first, and the kids that live the farthest away end up getting dropped off last. The idea is to flip that and to take the kids that live farthest away and drop them off first, thereby providing an incentive for the kids that live close to not ride the bus at all, but to just go ahead and walk home. So we'll be interested to see, how those policies take shape and how effective they are. I wanted to try and open it up. If everybody wants to unmute themselves, I wanted to ask, and I'll try and type on the screen, if anybody knows of some other ideas of policies, either at the municipal level or at the school level, that are either friendly or unfriendly to safe routes to school.
I have one. This is Teresa in Flint.
Hi, Teresa.
Hi. So one unfriendly policy that we have, this is a school-based policy. We have an after-school program in Flint that it has like different kind of programs for kids after school, homework help and art and stuff like that. They, in their program, they require that parents pick up the children and they don't let the kids walk home by themselves. But there's not explicit language in the permission slip for the program that says I will be walking home with my child. It just says pick up, which I think makes people think of driving immediately. That just kind of is the first thing you think of when you hear pick up. So we're trying to work on how can we help them reframe that and say I will be present at the end of the program or something like that. Just trying to encourage people to think about what does picking up your kid from after school program look like and what does that mean.
Thanks, Teresa. That's a good one. Over on the friendly side, we have early release for walkers. Yep, that's a good one.
This is Teresa in Flint again. Our school playgrounds are open in the morning. So when kids walk, they can go get on the playground.
Yeah, that's a good one. Kind of like the building being open.
Mm-hmm. So when it's nice out, they can do that. So yeah, they have the playground open. I don't think they have any staff out, but they do let it just be open. Most of them are not fenced in, but if they are, they open the gate.
Here's the one I just typed in about related to school siting. Some communities have an ordinance that or a zoning requirement that when new schools are built, they must put in sidewalks to connect them to the neighborhoods. Anytime you have, infrastructure that makes it safe for kids to walk to school, you're going to increase more walkers. Unfriendly. Gates on pathways are closed and locked. Yep, that's a good one. How about no one on school property? We can go ahead and end the annotation, and our next speaker is going to be Adam Jenks.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Max. And as mentioned before, I'm the program coordinator for the Safe Routes to School program. One of the comments I really appreciate on the chat box was that there's certain policies that are put into place without the input of students. And one of my main responsibilities as the program coordinator is to assist communities with engaging students in different things like Max mentioned with the walk-in school bus, incorporating corner captains as a way to supervise students, kind of junior crossing guard programs or with engaging with the kids. So there's a lot of different things that can be done to determine what would be a sound policy that makes sense to kids. And just as a transition into what I'm going to be talking about with this presentation today is whereas Max did an excellent job of laying out the policies and different programs that can build sustainable safe routes programs, I'm going to be speaking to more of the organizational aspects and maybe alternative sources to find ways to accomplish different objectives in the community that are agreed on that maybe even go beyond safe routes to school or link up with pre-existing type of programs. So just a quick poll here. I want to get a sense of what kind of organization you're representing today, just because that makes it easier for me to make those connections and have this a little more relevant with our conversations about how you might be able to engage with the schools directly or the municipal government in certain ways. Okay, so it looks like we've got a fairly even spread here with nonprofit, which could mean a lot of different things, and maybe we can hear from those individuals later when we bring up the kind of activity that's going on in your community that maybe brought you to this presentation and led you to consider starting or continuing a Safe Routes to School program in your community. This is an important thing to know just because these organizations might not necessarily be in the same room when discussing safe routes in the beginning. But what I want to talk about today is just laying out some opportunities for you to begin a dialogue with these different organizations and different facets that make up a sustainable Safe Routes to School program. So at its basic level, one of the big strengths of the Safe Routes to School program and the grants that we provide are that linkage between school and municipality. So there's a lot of communities where these two entities are not communicating. This might affect the things that Max was talking about as far as maybe not having policies that line up with the interests or the safety objectives of either one. But with the Safe Routes program, there are plenty of opportunities to find common ground with safety and fitness and health objectives and bring that together to work quite possibly for a major grant with infrastructure where they can make more immediate gains in communication and also have a tangible outcome with infrastructure and engaging students in these programs. So although those are two really important pieces, really the glue that holds them together is going to be that local champion. And they are really going to take many different shapes and forms depending on where you find yourself in the process, what is the culture, the makeup of your community. And there are really four big tenets here when you're thinking about a grant program, where you go through that early planning process, putting together a strong proposal, who is going to be able to guide construction, and then who's going to, in the long term, be able to keep that programming sustainable to begin to make these systemic big cultural changes of having students in the community more aware of active transportation, of better safety outcomes that are related to things like Vision Zero, and getting everybody on the same page. And one of the things that is completed in this process that you are going to want a lot of different voices and perspectives contributing to is the Safe Routes to School Action Plan. So if you have participated in past Safe Routes to School webinars, or if you have visited our website, then you are most likely aware of the 6 E's that make up the planning considerations for a Safe Routes to School program. Among those are education, encouragement, enforcement, equity. The engineering part obviously comes into play with the major grant. These are things that are going to have considerations of different organizations that might have closer expertise to what everyone agrees on should happen, or different priorities that they want to see addressed in their community linked to the Safe Routes to School plan. So this is an important part to things, and what I'm going to be talking about next are who are the specific people that you can reach out to, what have we seen in the past, what are some alternative sources of funding to fill in the gaps where maybe Safe Routes to School is not able to fund that component to your project or proposal. So I'm going to go into that. And a good starting point is, of course, what, as I mentioned before, that local champion. They can come in many different forms. They do not have to be tied directly to the school or the municipality. Oftentimes they do come from a big advocate that is involved with those places, but they can be from trail groups. They might be a really strong elected official that maybe is a part of their mission as their in their local role is to advocate for things tied to safe routes. You could be a cycling club, conservation clubs, PTA or PTO. These are all different organizations and people that really come to the table and push for these things to act as almost like a facilitator in those early stages of reaching out to Michigan Fitness Foundation, determining and communicating with the people in their community about what they want to see change. So the local champion, we've noticed, is really the X factor out there and the common variable that makes the most successful programs and projects to run in the end. Along with this local champion, as I mentioned before, they are more of that facilitator of the planning process and planning of things, but they might not necessarily have specific technical assistance that's going to be necessary in putting together a sound plan for infrastructure that is a best practice, or a program that educates and encourages students in ways that they respond to or motivates them. So there might be some different organizations on a local or regional level that you might want to work with that can achieve these things that are beyond the purview of the champions or the people at that most basic level. So some of the examples of what we've seen in the past goes as follows. In your city, typically, you're going to have an engineer on staff, and if not, then they will likely be working with a consulting firm to assess the pre-existing conditions. You would want to work with them to conduct a walking audit and go around and look at what are the barriers that are in place at the moment that restrict or compromise safe active transportation. So they're going to be able to look at that and put together your infrastructure considerations in the long term. Community foundations, and once again, those champions typically have a level of expertise over a long period of time where they're able to add some more technical insight. Some great examples of different organizations that we have seen work with projects are the Five Healthy Towns Foundation around the general Chelsea, Dexter, Grass Lake area of the state, where they are an organization tied to the hospital, so more health-minded, and they are instrumental in setting up wellness centers in these 5 communities, and they use that pre-existing relationship to facilitate planning meetings, determine what everyone was looking to have happen in their community, and using that relationship to put together a Safe Routes to School application. And they've been a highly successful organization when it comes to implementing major and mini in-programming grants. Also, the Wayne State University Center for Urban Studies has been a great partner in Detroit as far as having an intimate knowledge of the sociological aspects of the community, and also bringing in different resources that are not eligible with the grant. So we're not able to directly fund things like board ups with different communities if you have an abandoned building, but they've been able to fill that gap in, and then also leverage those efforts into a major grant and mini grant programming situation. Also, Special Olympics have been consulted in the past when it comes to coming up with specialized equity concerns with making sure that all users are engaged with that planning process and being able to participate in active transportation. And then there was one last one here that has completely different mission than all of these organizations that I mentioned before, with the Mackinac Economic Alliance. So they're looking at it from a local benefit from maybe business owners that are seeing how the benefits of safe, active transportation in schools and neighborhoods builds up a community for the greater whole. So all of these organizations are very different in their mission, but are all able to give their 2 cents as far as what the considerations should be for the different related topics to coming up with a Safe Routes program. So one partnership that is very helpful that we found is with the Michigan State School of Planning, Construction, and Design. And we partner with them every year to work with just a select few communities to give an additional level of technical assistance. So what this team will do is they will take applications at different points of the year. They will select communities that they feel like they can lend different engineering and planning recommendations to. So on staff, they have a urban planner, they have a landscape architect, civil engineer. So you're getting a lot of different perspectives from that technical standpoint. And once the community decides that they would like to have this extra technical assistance, then it's a fee of $3,000 for full action plan service that would go into moving the community along through the Safe Routes to School planning process with their highly informed perspectives, but also making sure they're engaging all of the proper stakeholders in your community, and they really help guide that process. So if you would like some more information about pursuing this, then please reach out to us. Your regional grant coordinator will be able to link you up with the proper contacts to maybe start having some conversations about this. But also there is some information on our website with this, but please reach out to us if you feel like your community could benefit from this higher level of technical assistance. Along with things happening on a local level, there are plenty of opportunities on a regional basis that have been going on for a long time and have that sustainable perspective in mind when they are coordinating these regional and long-term plans. So, and some examples of this would be the Great Lake to Lake Trail, where you're connecting the Great Lakes through a regional network. And probably the most notable trail that you hear about is the Iron Bell Trail, where we're connecting biking and walking trails all the way from Belle Isle to the Upper Peninsula, traversing the entire state. So those are types of trails or active transportation infrastructure that is not necessarily work that you would achieve through Safe Routes to School, Oftentimes we see this overlapping context where you're able to, if they are crossing into your community, you can work with the already established trail groups and people that are getting that work done, and lends itself to your Safe Routes program and get some of that work done. People to reach out to would be your metropolitan planning organization, as they have that regional perspective, and they would be able to let you know if there are any plans to possibly go through your community. So there might be some chances to link up with their efforts to work with these regional trails along with those regional planning associations. Also, the County Road Commission is someone that you would want to be in contact with. If you're a city or village, you would be the entity that would be applying for the grant in the end, but not necessarily if you are a township. Regardless of that, a lot of times the scope of work goes into different jurisdictions, and you would need to have everybody at the table as far as signing off on the work that has to be done. So the benefit of that is that you are seeing their long-term work fit in with your local context. Some other examples of trails that have opportunities to intersect with Safe Routes programs are the Downriver Link Greenways Trail, the Iron Ore Heritage Trail. These are examples of where you might be able to pair a Safe Routes project with long-term sustained efforts. Along with those regional plans, as I kind of referenced before, there are some aspects to your project that the community might agree are going to be necessities to the best trail and the one that works for your community. However, we might not necessarily be able to fund everything. So what we recommend is looking into other funding sources that could be paired with your project. Although the Safe Routes to School program is under the Transportation Alternatives umbrella of MDOT, they have certain aspects that would be eligible in their grant that might not necessarily be eligible in the Safe Routes grant. So a perfect example of this more recently was that we have a community that is looking to connect the neighborhoods to the school campuses, but they also have the desire to safely redirect students away from a busy roadway and onto a pedestrian bridge. So this pedestrian bridge was not something that we were going to be able to do with the Safe Routes grant, but it was something that could be achieved through the Transportation Alternatives or TAP program with MDOT. So we were able to work together to come up with extra funding to clearly enhance the safety of the trail, but also access funds that outside of our grant. Also, the DNR Trust Fund is a source that can add amenities along your trail or your path that might enhance or make it more likely to encourage students or community members to use that path. As Max mentioned, the establishment of a complete streets policy sometimes opens the door to supplement your grant with local funds if that's something that is agreed on a municipal level. That is an opportunity to build consensus with the objectives of Safe Routes as well. And getting closer to the programming aspects, Max talked about bike trains, and you're able to engage students with different bike clubs or fix-it sessions. There's all kinds of options that we are able to fund on a programmatic level, but bikes can be expensive to cover through the grant. Just with the requirement that the bikes need to be sourced in the United States, as far as the steel that's being used, sometimes drives the cost up. If you're looking to be able to supply a really optimal level of bikes to the students, there are a lot of different opportunities to work with organizations to get those extra bikes in. So the League of Michigan Bicyclists have grants every year to fund bikes and maybe even other biking infrastructure that can supplement your grant as well. A great example in Detroit is an organization called Back Alley Bikes, where they have a program that works with youth to fix up an old bike. And once they have learned those skills to maintain their bike, they're actually able to earn that bike. So we're actually seeing that program taken by even smaller places. Detroit obviously being a very large urban context, but we're seeing that spread into smaller communities because that is a great way for them to not only get a bike to a kid, but also build those more sustained expertise with that active transportation mode. So we have a representative from the Crim Foundation with us today, and she might want to talk about that more later. But one thing that we noticed that they did a great job with was putting solar lights on houses that were in kind of darkened context along different routes that were identified for students. So obviously in the winter months, there's not a whole lot of sunlight, and it can be difficult for any school or community to get kids to go out there in the snow and in the dark, but they came up with a really great solution to reassure parents in the community around the different school campuses with installing solar lights that would not really be something that you could cover with the Safe Routes grant, but because of that partnership, they were able to install these and also work with the University Avenue Corridor Coalition, who has sort of a more economic interest in these programs to be able to go ahead and work in step with the objectives of their Safe Routes program. Another great example of these sustained partnerships is in the small community up north called Mansalona. And really the strength of this program was to take a program that was going to have relatively high engineering costs, which unfortunately we're not able to cover those design and engineering costs through the grant, but because of the relationship with the County Road Commission and with the local Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Native American tribe, they were able to cover those costs and build a consensus and sustained effort working with the Northwest Michigan Health Department to get that health perspective. So there were all kinds of moving parts that were able to accomplish not only the major grant and infrastructure, but the implementation of some programs with the different health officials in the area as well. So there's another community, Harrison, that's kind of in the middle of the state, a little more north. They worked with DTE and Chemical Bank to get some different work done along their path. They were able to accomplish some tree removal and shrub installations along the multi-use path. So if you see the path in the lower part of the screen, that did not exist before. It was right by the football field, and especially with athletic events, people would just pull their cars up to that space, really impede any opportunity for students or anybody to move along without going in the roadway. And so what they were able to do was discourage cars from coming up and just watching the game with the installation of the shrubs blocking that view, but also getting that wide multi-use path in. And a lot of the different amenities or pieces that were included along this path wouldn't be possible without that outside public-private partnership with DTE and Chemical Bank. So that was a creative way to maximize the aspects of the grant. As I mentioned before, Wayne State University does a lot of great work along the different routes that are identified in Detroit, especially after some of the infrastructure has been put in. So they are able to work with AmeriCorps and do a series of home safety assessments. So they're looking at different problematic aspects along the route that might be abandoned buildings, things that would discourage students from wanting to take that path. And they're able to work with different neighborhood service groups like Brothers on Patrol, as you see on the lower picture there, who are able to go around and just add extra supervision in peak hours in the morning and in the afternoon when there's going to be a lot of student foot traffic. So with their relationship with the different neighborhoods in Detroit, they were able to really spread that programming out as well. I just have a couple questions that we'd like to consider here with the last few minutes, and maybe lead to some questions that you might have. and be able to entertain those, as we're a little limited for time here. But what we would like to know is, with your organization so far, who are some outside partners that you are currently working with? If that's not something that is necessarily happening currently, then based on the different examples that we showed today and different policies that you might be working on, who are some outside partners in your community that could fit the role of the things that we're talking about? With that, if you feel that you have something you'd like to contribute, you can use the raise hand option, or we can also check on the chat.
So we have in the chat a couple notes from the township and bike clubs or running clubs in their area that they're partnering with.
Yeah, excellent. So if you care, I'd be really interested in hearing some of the direct things that those organizations are working on. Obviously, if you are a bike user or in a running club, they're experiencing the pre-existing conditions on a day-to-day basis. One interesting example that we heard in one conversation was consulting the mail service, male men and male women that are walking from house to house are definitely someone that has that intimate knowledge of what's going on.
A couple other things that have been mentioned have been banks, possibly, I think for the second question, the area's Rotary Club, banks, as well as churches, and that they're already currently working with the Township Planning Commission leader for their project.
One really helpful consideration that we've seen churches jump in with, many churches, there's a service-oriented mission with what they're doing with just their general programming. So they've been able to help out with extra supervision, with paths and things along those lines. But also there's a program known as a remote drop-off site, where there are clearly communities where students are living much further out from the campus and need to be driven or bused to some extent. But what churches have many times done is volunteered their parking lots during the week that are not really being used from Monday through Friday, and allowing students to stop at those spots and walk or bike from that location. So this is another example of how your outside organizations can build more practical or sustained solutions to different barriers. Okay, we'll stick around a little bit longer to field any questions that you may have, but if you would like to reach out to Max or myself, then we have our contact up there. And before you leave, we would appreciate if you were able to go ahead and give your input on the bit.ly link as you see on the screen. So that will just enable us to identify some of the things that you're interested in and improve what we're bringing to the table for our discussion. So we really appreciate you filling that out.